It was Thanksgiving night. While most people were gathered around their dinner tables, I found myself deep underground, surrounded by the dull hum of flickering lights and the constant hum of subway rails. Working as a maintenance technician wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I didn't mind the solitude. Usually, that night felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, an oppressive stillness that clung to the tunnel walls like a second skin. I chalked it up to exhaustion. The holiday season always came with longer shifts and more impatient passengers. After hours of checking circuits and repairing worn equipment, I retreated to the break room. It was a cramped, windowless box with a dented table and a couple of mismatched chairs. The fluorescent light above buzzed faintly, threatening to go out. I settled into my chair, unwrapped a turkey sandwich I brought from home, and stared at my phone, scrolling through family pictures. I should have been there with them, laughing, arguing over pumpkin pie. Instead, I was here, surrounded by concrete and stale air. I must have drifted off because the next thing I knew, I was frozen in place. Sleep paralysis. It wasn't the first time, but it never got less terrifying. My body refused to obey me, my limbs pinned like lead weights. I couldn't even move my eyes, but I could see enough. Out of corner of my vision, a shadowy figure loomed near the edge of the tracks. It was tall and indistinct, its form almost shifting in the dim light. What struck me was the way it moved, slowly, deliberately, as though aware of my helplessness. It raised one arm, a hand-like appendage extending outward, waving at me. It didn't feel like a greeting. It felt like a summons. My chest tightened. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped. The figure didn't move closer, but its presence pressed on me, cold and suffocating. Just as I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, I jerked awake, gasping for air. The room was silent except for my own ragged breathing. I glanced at the clock. Only 10 minutes had passed. Shaking my head, I tried to dismiss it as a vivid nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But my hands were trembling as I picked up my sandwich again. That's when I heard it. Knock, knock. The sound was faint at first, barely distinguishable from the ambient noises of the tunnel. Then it grew louder, more insistent. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to stay put. But curiosity got the better of me, as it often does in these situations. I opened the door to find a disheveled man standing there, his clothes torn and dirty, his face gaunt and hollow. He looked up at me with wild, bloodshot eyes and whispered, "They're coming." "Who's coming?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "They," he repeated, his gaze darting toward the tunnel. "You don't understand. They come when the lights flicker. They're always watching." I reached for the sandwich on the table, offering it to him in the hopes of calming him down. He snatched it from my hand, stuffing it into his mouth with a feral desperation. But as he ate, his body seemed convulsed, his eyes rolling back. "They'll take you too," he rasped, pointing a trembling finger toward the tunnel. The lights flickered. I didn't want to look. Every fiber of my being begged me to slam the door and lock it, but something compelled me to turn my head. At first, I saw nothing but darkness. Then, 2 pinpricks of light appeared, like distant stars. They weren't stars. They were eyes, glowing, unblinking eyes. A chill ran down my spine as more pairs of eyes appeared, emerging from the blackness like a predator's gaze in the dead of night. I counted 5, 6, 7, too many to keep track. They stared at me, not with malice, but with an unnerving patience, as if waiting for something. The homeless man let out a guttural scream, a sound so raw it made my stomach turn. He bolted toward the tunnel, his ragged form swallowed by the darkness. I should have stopped him. I should have done something. But I was rooted to spot, paralyzed by a fear deeper than I'd ever known. The lights flickered again and the eyes vanished. The tunnel was silent, the man gone. I slammed the door shut, barricading myself inside the break room. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone, my hand shaking so violently I could barely dial. But who was I supposed to call? The cops? What would I even say? Help! There are glowing eyes in the subway. I didn't leave the room for the rest of my shift. When dawn finally broke, I bolted for the nearest exit, leaving my tools and bag behind. The next day, I turned in my resignation. My supervisor tried to convince me to stay, but I couldn't go back. Not after what I'd seen. I started digging into the subway's history, hoping to make sense of it all. That's when I came across the urban legends. Stories of ghostly figures haunting the tunnels, of workers who vanished during late-night shifts, of them. The accounts varied, but they all shared one chilling detail: the eyes. To this day, I can't ride the subway. Even the thought of descending those stairs makes my stomach churn. People laugh when I tell them, chalking it up to exhaustion or an overactive imagination. But I know what I saw, and I know they're still down there. I chose to spend Thanksgiving night at the asylum turn-retreat, hoping solitude would inspire my art. The building, once a place of despair, had been transformed into a haven for artists. Yet, its history clung to every corner, like the scent of decay that no amount of fresh paint or incense could mask. My studio was a former patient's room. The walls were thick with layers of time, whispering stories I didn't want to hear. The window, narrow and barred, let in just enough moonlight to remind me of my isolation. I set up my easel, unpacked my brushes, and began to paint. The asylum was supposed to be inspiring, but as my brush moved across the canvas, I felt a heaviness settle over me. Each stroke was labored, as though the air itself resisted my attempts to create. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my trance. A text. "Are you afraid of the dark?" My first instinct was to laugh. One of the other artists, surely, trying to spook me. But I was alone on this floor, and the retreat coordinator had been clear. The other attendees were housed in a different wing. My thumbs hovered over the screen, debating whether to reply, but I dismissed it and went back to painting. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, sleep came reluctantly. When it did, it brought with it a suffocating weight. My chest felt pinned, my limbs paralyzed. A shadow emerged in the corner of the room, impossibly tall and indistinct, its edges bleeding into the darkness. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It advanced, a grotesque shape that barely resembled a person. Its hand, skeletal and cold, gripped my ankle. Then I was moving, not by my own will, but dragged, scraping down endless halls that seemed to twist and writhe like a living thing. I woke gasping, the morning light piercing to bars of the window. The terror lingered, a phantom weight on my chest. Swinging my legs off the bed, my feet landed on the cold floor and I froze. There were scratches on the wooden floorboards, starting beneath my bed and extending toward the door. They were fresh, as if something or someone had been clawing at the wood in the night. I spent the day painting, using the fear from a night before as fuel, but the text continued. "Do you feel it watching? The shadows know your name." Each message was more unnerving than the last, describing details about the asylum I hadn't known, things I hadn't shared with anyone. It mentioned room 214, the room I was staying in, and a name, Margaret Wells. Curiosity got the better of me. The retreat had an old storage room filled with dusty records from the asylum's past. I spent hours searching until I found a file on Margaret Wells. She was a patient who had suffered from vivid hallucinations and sleep paralysis. She claimed a shadowy figure haunted her, dragging her through the halls at night. The staff dismissed her as delusional until they found her dead in her room. The report didn't specify how she died, only that the floor beneath her bed was marked with deep scratches. The air in my studio grew colder as the sun set. I painted feverishly, the image on the canvas emerging unbidden. The brush moved as though guided by another hand. I realized too late that I was painting the shadowy figure from my nightmares. Its form was clearer now, a hunched, skeletal frame cloaked in darkness, its face an amalgamation of human features twisted into a mockery of life. But what terrified me most was its hand. It was reaching out from the canvas, its clawed fingers stretching toward me as though it could breach the barrier between our worlds. Another text. "Finish it." I couldn't stop. The brush in my hand moved against my will, filling in details that no imagination could conjure. The shadow's eyes, hollow endless voids, stared directly at me. That night, the sleep paralysis returned. This time, I wasn't in my bed. I was standing in the hallway, the cold seeping through the soles of my feet. The shadow was there, blocking the exit. "You brought me back," it rasped, its voice like 1,000 whispers layered atop each other. I tried to run, but the hall stretched endlessly in both directions. The walls closed in, the ceiling dropped lower, and the shadow loomed larger. It reached for me again, its hand brushing my face. I woke to find the painting complete. The shadow's hand had fully emerged from the canvas, its fingers clawing the air. The scratches on the floor were deeper, more pronounced. The text stopped after that night, but the asylum didn't let me go. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in those halls, chased by the shadow. I left the painting behind when I fled, but sometimes I hear whispers in the darkness, urging me to finish what I started. I don't paint anymore,